Hello, everybody. My name's Jimmy Smith, and welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thanks so much for stopping by for this WSET Level 4 Diploma video. This is looking at Unit 1 or D1, which is on wine production for the WSET Diploma. And this is kicking off the growing environment section, which will be a very large multi-part series. If you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, please do get in touch. You can do so via commenting on the comment section of this YouTube video, or getting in touch if you're looking on the e-learning portal by either the social media that you see at the bottom of each slide, or you can do it via the Wine with Jimmy website, www.winewithjimmy.com, for the e-learning portal. Okay, so the first two videos in this multi-part series will be available as free content on YouTube, and the remaining many others will only be available to members of the e-learning portal. Great, so let's rock and roll. So talking about the growing environment. So the growing environment, of course, is what is absolutely pivotal for us growing grapes. Warmth and light are critical for vine growth, vine development, and grape formation and ripening. Of course, it's very important to master this art so we are able to get the best out of the vine. And specifically, temperature is very important. So temperature in particular is thought to have a very significant effect on vine functioning. It can also have a huge influence on really what is planted where. So what grape varieties we find in what certain areas, therefore influencing the style and the quality. And really, if grapes are able to ripen at all. So very important. And really, many people believe it's the fundamental factor, really, for cultivating the vine. Solar radiation is the main source of both heat and sunlight, so important for the vine's survival, but also then for photosynthetic capabilities. And there are many factors that can influence the amount of solar radiation available. And we're going to go through all of those in the growing environment section. So talking around heat and the influence of heat. So we're calling this the effects of temperature. And first of all, talking around the dormancy period of the vine. Remember, the vine goes through two distinctive seasons, a dormant season, which is winter, and then, of course, the growth season, stretching from spring to autumn, which is bud burst to harvest. So we are looking here at the dormant section at cold temperatures. We really need there to be consistently cold temperatures, but not overtly cold, for the vine to go into a very important dormant season in order to replenish itself for the forthcoming year, for the forthcoming growth season. Vines that do not go through typical dormancy and potentially have multiple crops per year are overworked, and they often do not last as long. They do not survive as long, and the quality often diminishes as well. Often this is found in many subtropical climates. So that is a bit of an issue. Of course, that will mean that replantation will have to be quite constant in those areas. So the cold temperatures we're looking at, on every slide, I've got a nice little red box that gives you the key fundamental temperatures, either the what we need it under or over, or a range, and they're both in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So under 10 degrees Celsius will ensure that winter dormancy, both the endodormancy and the ecodormancy of the vine. However, extreme temperatures will exist, of course, and these are, of course, looking at, say, something like well into the minuses. So minus 20 degrees Celsius, that would be around -4 Fahrenheit, can cause winter freezes, which can end up destroying the vines. Certainly vines which are more susceptible, and vines that are younger often are more at risk. It's often the point which has been grafted, so the European Vitis vinifera grafting point onto the rootstock is really where the vine's at its most vulnerable. So this is often an area which is hit with these excessive cold temperatures. And one I want to mention, there's just another picture here of a very, very cold winter. But one I want to mention is the Malbec case study. So I've thrown this in just so it gives you an anecdotal point and a bit of evidence. So Malbec, as we know, is a variety which comes from the southwest of France. And it was planted in quite large amounts across places like Bordeaux, so the Gironde estuary, and the southwest, so places like Gascony, along the Lot River, the Tarn River. There was quite a lot of Malbec found down in that area. Malbec is a variety which likes more mild temperatures during the winter time, enough to go into dormancy, of course, but still not bitterly cold. So, of course, in the southwest of France, where there is the effect of the Gulf Stream, the Bay of Biscay and the Atlantic, often the winters are not that bitterly cold. They're not that continental. But in 1 year specifically, and this is looking at about 70 years ago, and I'll pop down the year, so hopefully you can remember that. But 1956 was a year that really goes down in infamy for grape growing in the southwest, because in February, really at the end of January and into February, for around 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks, there were temperatures regularly below minus 20 degrees Celsius. And I think the coldest points were around minus 25 and minus 26 degrees Celsius. Not just a spike, not just for a day or two, but for a prolonged period of time. The Malbec vines around the southwest of England perished, and they perished at an alarming rate. So many of them died. Other vines survived this and were seemed to be quite capable of surviving these quite cold conditions. Younger vines were dying off as well. Okay, so very cold temperatures. So what happened in the southwest is that grape growers were, of course, very worried about this. And instead of replanting with copious amounts of Malbec, they replanted with varieties which survived the winter freeze. Things like Fur Cervidou, things like Tannat, things like Cabernet Franc, and many others. So Malbec actually, because of Mother Nature really playing a really harsh hand in 1956, was very much stunted. There was very little amounts of it left available after 1956. One area in the southwest of France, which is Cahors, replanted. They made a collective decision to really go for it, and it's become the spiritual home of Malbec in the southwest of France, and it always really has been as well. So they replanted with Malbec, and that's why you don't get dramatically old vines in Cahors, because many of them were destroyed. Most of the oldest vines today are around 70 years old due to that replantation. And this is another reason why most people in the general public believe that Malbec is from places like Argentina, because there is very little amounts of it available in comparison to what there was available today in comparison to the past. So that's a little bit of a case study there for extreme winter cold conditions. So let's talk about that stage when we move from dormancy into spring. And temperature is mightily important here, as it really governs the vine's switch from the dormancy period into bud burst and the initial stages of the growth of the vine. So temperatures above 10 degrees Celsius, so this of course is the opposite of when we were talking about dormancy, where it needs to be below 10 degrees Celsius, is often needed. It's not always dead on 10. Of course, there are different varieties which actually will open up earlier. So maybe it might be just shy of 10 degrees Celsius either way. So this stimulates bud burst, of course, and it tends to be bud burst more successful, more consistent, and more uniform when temperature goes above 10 degrees, but then it starts to significantly rise after that, with no, of course, fluctuation or dramatic decreases. Warm soil temperatures too can also promote bud burst. So different geology here will come into play. Cold temperatures that bring in frost, of course, and start to dramatically reduce the temperature at this time can be exceptionally harmful to these buds here, which in those very early stages are exceptionally vulnerable. And we've talked about this many times before in the vine growth cycle and so on. And that will reduce quite a lot of yields, for instance. So rising temperatures in spring. Then we're looking at the ideal temperatures just after that, so going through spring and into early summer for shoot growth. So looking at the ideal conditions of temperature for shoot growth. So as the very new shoots, the main shoots start to develop with their tendrils and leaves, of course, the vine begins to use photosynthesis to create its sugar for energy. Previously at that point, the vine has been drawing upon its carbohydrate starch supplies, which it found in the roots and the trunk, which was stored during the dormant period. That was its kind of starter. And it used that, and then as soon as these leaves are developing, like in this picture, of course, it starts to then go through photosynthesis. The optimum temperature range, as you will see here at the bottom, is around 18 degrees Celsius to around 33 degrees Celsius. That's 64 to 91 Fahrenheit. So normally this is quite consistent, really, going through places like May and June for shoot growth, and even into July a little bit. So this is normally quite consistent during our summer days. So this is not usually an issue at this time for shoot growth. And as long as there's water availability as well, that shoot growth will be pretty consistent. Then, of course, we have the vine going through a very important stage where it has its inflorescence, its flowering, and then fruit set shortly after that. And once again, temperature is very important during this stage as well. For really sort of successful and uniform, consistent flowering, you will need the first box here. Temperatures above 17 degrees Celsius, that's 63 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's in order really to maintain a successful amount of flowering. Remember, flowering is not something which is very uniform. Often it's something really between 30 and 60% successful flowers will develop into grapes. So of course, if it's consistently warm, plus many other factors, then we will actually gain more of a success rate. So above 17 degrees Celsius for that. And then fruit set. So of course, when the male pollen gets its way to the egg in the ovule, the ovary, and it successfully fertilizes and pollinates it, of course, if there have been quite stable conditions at that point, there will be a small grape forming, and that small grape will need, for that fruit set to really set in, it will need temperatures really at optimum range at around 26 to 32 degrees Celsius. So flowering will occur hopefully over a few days, maybe a week, and we need some consistent temperatures at that point. So this can be an issue. And of course, that fruit set, there can be issues with fruit sets, certainly around the amount of carbohydrates available, the amount of water available. And if it's too cold, then it's not going to be as successful. And this is where you get problems with unsuccessful fruit set, things like Mille Rendange, for instance. So yes, the big problems arise from cold, from damp conditions, and that will stop the, of course, production here, or reduce the production and reduce the yield. Then, of course, there is the term for something which is called bud fruitfulness. Not many people are aware of this, but as the vine is going through its growth stage, so shooting with its main shoots, and of course things like tendrils and things like leaves and so on, there are little buds that form called compound buds. They're compound because there are multiple buds within one of them, but they are the ones which will actually support the amount of information and all of the coding for the forthcoming year, so the next year. So this is what we call bud fruitfulness. Now you'll see I have identified on this picture that the bud here is formed and it is first detectable in that year beforehand, and you'll see it here. It's normally first detectable in early spring in what's called an axil, AXIL, and that's that little join between the main vine, the main shoot, which is the stem, and then the leaf petiole, which is this little part here, which of course the leaves will sit on. So it's right in that little area just there, and that's of the current year's leaves. But of course this has all the information inside it for the next year. So warm temperatures during this time, so this is of course during shoot development and inflorescence and flowering and so on, really will increase better bud fruitfulness for the forthcoming year. So above 25 degrees Celsius is welcome at this point, 77 degree Fahrenheit. And some of the earlier forms of these compound buds, so very early forms, will actually burst and develop into lateral shoots. But the rest of them will stay dormant, protecting its kind of coding that comes for the forthcoming year. And they begin to form in that coding things that are called shoot apical meristems, SAMs. And that's full of all the cells to produce leaves, to produce tendrils, and to produce inflorescence meristems. So these are all the codes pretty much for the vine growing in the forthcoming year. It's therefore quite important when you actually carry out pruning after harvest that you prune carefully, because in certain varieties, certain buds, certain compound buds like this will have better amounts of coding, better amounts of the meristems than others. So therefore, you have to be quite careful and you have to know your type of vine species. So that's bud fruitfulness. Then we have ideal temperatures for sugar accumulation, of course. Now this is looking at after veraison. This is between veraison and harvest. And temperature has a huge part to play, a huge influence on many aspects of grape ripening. Generally speaking, sugar accumulation in grapes are generally faster at warmer temperatures due to the optimum rates, of course, of photosynthesis. This produces, of course, sugars and increased grape transpiration. So, of course, the warmer temperatures will mean that the grape is transpiring more. So water is being brought up more from the extended root systems, and that promotes in turn better movement of glucose through the stem and finding its way to the grape, of course. So ideal temperatures, of course, are quite warm at this point. Now, this is something which I have shown before because it was relevant to actually the growth cycle as well, but a link between temperature and acidity. So malic acid, which I have identified here, don't worry about the asterisks on this, it means nothing on this slide, but malic acid degradation is increased at warmer temperatures. That is why in very cold places, malic acids are very much quite a big part of the wine, like Chardonnay in Chablis, for instance. Mean temperatures above 21 degrees Celsius, as we've identified here on this little thermometer, that's 70 degree Fahrenheit, in the final month of ripening can lead to a very rapid increased loss of acidity, as you see here. So it can lead to quite a quick loss in acidity if it's very much very high in temperature at the last month of ripening. Lower temperatures, so mean temperatures below 15 degrees Celsius, that's around 59 degree Fahrenheit, can reduce acid loss to a point where the acidity levels will be in the must far too high. So very, very abrasively high. So it's important to get a good, of course, balance between those. And then a little bit of influence on temperature and aroma compounds and precursors. So the effect of temperature on formation of aroma precursors, aroma precursors, just to reiterate, is an aroma found within a grape or within the vine, which is not detectable, but it will actually be much more evident when it's fermented. So it's called a precursor at this point. The effect is quite complex. It's not hugely understood, but generally speaking, riper aromas and flavors are associated, of course, with grapes that are found in warmer climates. But as I put here you've got a glass of white wine. There's a thermometer showing you cold temperatures, and that this actually will promote things like green pepper, asparagus, and grassy characteristics. That's because cool conditions may hinder the breakdown of methoxypyrazines. And methoxypyrazines, which we have talked about a lot already on the e-learning portal, are those that can give, through fermentation, very sort of herbaceous, boxwoody, grassy green pepper characteristics in wines. So repeatedly cold temperatures at the end of the year will actually mean that you'll have a greater volume or a greater amount of these methoxypyrazine characteristics. So that is a little bit about methoxypyrazine. Then we have the ideal temperatures for anthocyanin development, that is pigmentation. In black grapes, the anthocyanin synthesis is the optimum temperature around 15 to 25 degrees Celsius, as you can see here, 59 to 77 Fahrenheit. This is what will aid the development of color. Tannin synthesis will actually follow the same pattern, but we are not hugely experts at this. It's not exact science interlinked with the anthocyanin. It's definitely not mutually exclusive, but more research is definitely needed. So what about extreme heat and drought? So here you've got a little diagram showing you extreme heat and no water availability. So extreme heat, especially when it's paired with drought conditions, can cause the photosynthetic capability of the vine to stop, or to slow or to stop. And this can be often regarded to as blocking of glucose being produced in the grapes. This can either in turn be earlier on in the year, which stops vine growth, or stops glucose production in the grape later on in the year. So this is mainly due to the heat sensitivity of enzymes that carry out photosynthesis, and water stress, which is very typical in many hot regions like South Africa, for example, can produce these photosynthesis to slow down or stop as well. And that's due to the vine shutting the stomata, little mouths, the little pores on the leaves, which act out transpiration. And of course, if there is a lack of water available to the vine, it's not bringing enough up through for transpiration, the stomata will be closed. And that means that it is not going to be producing photosynthesis as much, as it's a key part of it. The closed stomata means it will stop taking carbon dioxide in, and that's what I mean by inhibiting photosynthesis. A little example in play is of extreme heat and drought is the 2003 case study. Here you'll see a map of the temperature average mean anomaly during the 2003 growth season. And you'll see in many parts of South France, which is kind of around just north of Languedoc, in the southwest of France, and towards Bordeaux, up towards the Gironde, you'll see the anomaly is normally somewhere between sort of maybe 3 degrees Celsius up to, into some areas, 10 degrees Celsius more in average above the mean, the average per year. So 2003 was an exceptionally hot year in Western Europe, really warm, and we had many days in France above 35 degrees Celsius. Even in the United Kingdom, there were many days above 30 degrees Celsius. Normally, the average is somewhere around 2 or 3 on average in the United Kingdom, certainly in the southeast. I'm not sure how many were in 2003, but it was probably into the teens. And this was much warmer when you come down to the southwest of France. So what did this do with the vines? Well, before you understood the previous slide about the vine protecting itself and blocking any grape production or glucose production, you would think that the warmer conditions would produce more grapes and more happily. But of course, the vine goes through too much stress, too much water stress specifically, and too much heat stress. And as we mentioned, the stomata in the leaves close. This stops the intake of carbon dioxide. Transpiration is stopped. Photosynthesis comes to a stop as well. And this is evident in the 2003 Bordeaux wines. The average alcohol really around the 2003 Bordeaux wines was about 12.5%, when normally we're looking at about 13.5% these days for Bordeaux reds. So this is absolutely fascinating because, of course, many days were too stressful for the vine, and therefore grapes sugar production was lower, and therefore alcohols were lower. So it very much goes against the kind of normal thinking, a normal thought of pattern, until you think of the science behind it. And then differing grape varieties, of course, as well. So different grape varieties, of course, have different needs and sensitivities regarding heat and temperature. Later ripening varieties, such as Cabernet Sauvignon, may need greater amounts of heat, and this will be throughout its growing season in order to ripen significantly and successfully. This will be the heat within the environment, but maybe it is absorbed into things like soils, like gravels and stones, for example, in the left bank of Bordeaux. And this will help the ripeness not only of sugar accumulation, but also in the latter parts of the season, going right up to harvest with tannin development, tannin polymerization. So that extra bit of time on the vine helps those tannins develop quite nicely, so they won't be as astringent and green. Early ripening grape varieties, such as Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, the famous Burgundians, will need less heat in total, and these will generally ripen very early in very warm locations, of course. Okay, so that's the first section done on the effects of temperature, just the first section of many videos. Join me for part 2, and in part 2 we'll be looking at the effects of sunlight, and that will also be available on YouTube as well. If you haven't done already, please do check out the wonderful e-learning portal at www.winewithjimmy.com. You'll find loads of brilliant sections there to help you with your WSETs level 1 through to 4. So that's a real great resource with loads of things to gain your confidence to get you through your examinations. As always, if you have comments, questions, or concerns, get in touch via either commenting on this video or the social media at the bottom of each slide, or the Wine with Jimmy website. And if you're in London, come and see us at our wine school or our sister wine school, South London, or our wine bar. Come and see us for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Thank you very much.